Hello and a warm welcome to the programme from me, David Foster. You know, when everybody is shouting at once, it's often impossible to hear what's being said. Could the same be true for social media campaigns, where the message, however well intentioned, as in Black Lives Matter, is lost because of all the noise? This is Roundtable. I'm sort of wondering whether it is possible to tell the difference between good intentions and those that are simply virtue signaling, the optical allies, as it's been put.
Social media platforms can be used as an organising tool, and they have been used to mobilise millions across the globe in support of racial equality. Protests have spread worldwide following the killing of George Floyd, the unarmed black man who died after police officer Derek Chauvin kneeled on his neck for over 8 minutes. Earlier this month, Black Squares took over Instagram, part of a movement called Blackout Tuesday. The idea was that for one day, people would cease all normal activity on Instagram in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. But for some, Blackout Tuesday has been criticised as unhelpful. In particular, the actions of brands and influencers have been described as performative. Back in 2018, luxury fashion label Prada was criticised when some of its products at a store in New York appeared to contain blackface imagery. Last week, they showed their support for the Black Lives Matter movement by joining Blackout Tuesday. But social media users were quick to remind them of their previous racist actions. Many black activists say it is no longer enough to simply use social media to raise awareness. It must be followed up by action. So is it time to rethink how we use social media to support causes like Black Lives Matter?
We are now going to welcome to the programme in New York Dr. Tareq Connolly, Assistant Professor of Media and Communications at Montclair State University. In London, we have Hafsah Dabiri, founder of the community organisation, the Dabiri Group. And we go to Rome to say hello to the music producer, Charles Burchell. Great to have you all on the programme. I'm starting with you, Charles, because you are a music producer. And the original idea of Blackout Tuesday, I know it was called something else, came from two music producers. Some people have suggested that it was hijacked. What do you think?
Well, I think, for me as someone in the music community, it was interesting to see that when Tuesday came around, everybody was posting these black squares. Initially, I thought it would just be the music community rallying around the issue. And then I saw other people jumped on to the bandwagon. And I don't know if it was hijacked, but I will say that I think a lot of people use this as like a get out of jail free card and to say, okay, we should show solidarity with the black community right now. Let's post a square. Let's put out a little message. And this way we'll, kind of save face and be politically correct in this moment. But I do think that a lot of people missed the point of the original idea of why we were doing a Blackout Tuesday. And I definitely think it wasn't necessarily organized in the best way, but I think also with social media, so many things can get lost in translation and get lost once it starts to spread too much. But I do think there were some effective points of solidarity, at least amongst musicians and artists and activists, to show that we do all stand together on an issue. But, all these things could be executed better. But I think it's just right now we're in a moment where we also have to show that we can use these tools to come together.
Charles, you're suggesting that the original message may have got lost. Tell us what you think that message was and what message you think got out there.
Well, I think the original intent behind Blackout Tuesday was basically to take a break from black artists and just musicians in general promoting their music and promoting, their products, to say that, hey, the music industry, especially in America, is built off of the talent of black musicians and black artists and black innovators. And historically, we've been kept out of a lot of times the best deals. We've been put into these really bad contracts, and basically have had a lot of our art taken from us, appropriated, and resold and repackaged. So I think a lot of artists wanted to come together and show solidarity that, hey, we're going to stand together. We're going to stop our music. We're going to stop promoting our things, and we're going to all come together
Yeah.
about this
So
issue.
what happened? What was the message that came out?
I think what happened, to my view, is that everybody saw, okay, if I post a black square, that shows that I'm in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, but I don't really have to do anything. So I think, the original intent definitely, because there was another hashtag with the show must be paused. So the original intent was to get everybody to stop, promoting themselves and whatever might be used as a distraction from the issues of Black Lives Matter and to focus primarily on this cause. However, I think a lot of people just jumped to the idea that, oh, okay, if I just post a black square, I'm showing that I'm in solidarity. So it
So
got a little
perhaps some
confusing.
confusion. Yeah,
Yes,
and that's why I
definitely.
want to bring this in. This is from the rapper Lil Nas X, who tweeted, "I know you'll mean well, but bro, saying stop posting for a day is the worst idea ever. It's information that needs to be spread. The movement needs to be pushed forward, not silenced for a day." So Tara, and also you, Hafsah, as well. But Tara, first of all, is that what really happened? The movement was silenced for a day. It all went wrong if that was the case.
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand kind of what was going on and kind of really the logistics behind it. So, as Charles mentioned, the original hashtag started with the show must be paused. Two music executives decided to put together this campaign, and again, using the black square as a way to show solidarity. But what ended up happening was folks were using the hashtag in conjunction with Black Lives Matter. So what happened is when you went on Instagram, you would see, under the hashtag Black Lives Matter, a bunch of black squares. And the reason why it became a distraction was because a lot of organizers were using the hashtag Black Lives Matter as a way to find out information where protests were. So back to what Lil Nas X was saying is that, while it becomes something that was supposed to bring and raise awareness, it ended up becoming a logistical distraction. And there was a lot of social media influencers as well as other celebrities that found the campaign problematic. But some of the things I teach my students about kind of this bottom-up campaign, social media campaign work is that it's not necessarily organic. Bottom-up meaning corporate produced. Again, the original hashtag was the show must be paused started from some music executives, and then it kind of sprawled into this kind of organic campaign, but the problem was there was no real call to action behind it. There was no, in my opinion, there was no set plan, and so it was confusing.
It was muddled. It was a terrible
muddled.
muddle. Yeah, Hafsah, what do you make of the fact that, well, Charles mentioned it, he called it performative. I perhaps would call it virtue signaling, that an awful lot of this was people simply saying, look, I can do this, and then stopping their involvement. Another social media message perhaps gone wrong.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Muriel Harper called it optical allyship, so literally doing it for the optics. And unfortunately, when we have social media campaigns, we can fall into the trap of not holding people accountable to their actions. So we have organizations and big institutions that are posting black squares on Tuesday, but their internal organizations have issues with racism, systematic racism, racist policies that they're not dealing with internally. So I think within the London community, at least, because that's all I can speak about, on social media, I was seeing a lot of, okay, if you posted a black square, there would be internal criticism and external criticism from social media followers, like, okay, you're a business who's posted the black square, but you've previously been called up on this and this previously, and you haven't dealt with it. So I think secondary actions after, we've posted on social media need to happen on the ground as well.
How do you tell the difference? Is it possible to tell the difference between good intentions and optical allyship, as you call it, virtue signaling?
I think it very much depends on a case-by-case basis. But one of the things that I've been seeing is that sometimes people center their allyship within their own morals and values and what they think they should be putting forward rather than what the community needs and is requesting of them. So, for example, within the Arab community, I've been seeing a number of Arab influencers posting blackface during this period as a show of solidarity and making statements like they wish they were black. And that just shows for me that that's quite clearly.
Yeah, you've written about Arab supremacy and Asian supremacy.
Yeah. So I've my dissertation was on Black Muslim women and the experiences that we go through in terms of anti-Blackness within the Muslim community specifically that stems from Arab and Asian supremacy. So in the UK, we have a majority Asian Arab Muslims, and that can sometimes lend way to microaggressions within our spaces of worship. And with this discussion on Black Lives Matter, I think it's really important that we look at our communities as well and try and tackle anti-Blackness and racism that exists within that.
Yeah, Charles, something that you said to one of our producers is what makes Right Now different is the Black community saying we're not going to do this work to educate people outside of the community. All the information's out there. There are a lot of great resources to educate yourselves. And I would suggest in putting out a message like that, that you are ghettoizing this issue.
Well, to be clear, to maybe I wasn't clear necessarily. It's not that we're not willing to educate people. I think that what's different is that now people understand that if just the idea of understanding Black humanity as something that people should care about who are not Black, if this issue, the people who want to be allies and the people who want to care about this issue need to understand that it's not a trending topic. It's not just a one day post, but it's actual real work that you have to do, and that you can't depend on your Black friends or your Black colleagues to sit and be your professor, because a lot of times, especially in America, we don't learn true African American history. We don't really learn about the things that our people have gone through. So we have to do this independent research just to know who we are and know our own history. So then,
but let me throw out another tweet from
yes.
somebody, just a member of the public, Anthony James Williams. He was a Black man, and he said it is intentionally what you're suggesting and unintentionally hiding critical information. Are we using on the ground and online? Tell me how this helps Black folk. It doesn't.
To my point, I just believe that we all have to do the work to understand each other, right? To understand how to be better humans within society. And I think that right now that everybody who wants to care about Black Lives Matter or anti-racism has to understand that they have to do the work to educate themselves, right? And it's not just that if you know Black people and you're associated with Black people, or you're associated with people who are protesting, or you're associated with people who are in these various movements, that's enough, or that you release a statement and that's enough. And to me, that's the point, is that it's not just enough to post something. It's not just enough to be on social media, but there's hundreds of years of books that you can reference to learn about the conditions of Black people, to learn about systematic racism, and to learn about how you can use your privilege or your position or your institution to actually empower Black people, to empower the people who are fighting for our causes, and to understand what we're talking about. But to simply say, oh, I'm not racist and I don't know what's going on, but I'll check in with my Black friend and they'll tell me what to do, is not enough.
Okay, Tara, tell me what you mean when you suggest that either people or social media sites themselves need to be more discerning, was what you said.
So I think it's important to kind of contextualize what we talk about when we mean social media. We're talking about essentially social practices, what we do, and what those social practices reveal about this moment. So when I mention that, we need to be more discerning in how we, weed through information and amplify campaigns. I mean that we have to kind of think about our practices on social media and how we, like what Charles was saying, how we educate ourselves, how we educate others. I think we have to make sure that we're taking the responsibility, not just posting, a Black a symbol or a hashtag, but what are the intentions behind that? What are the actions behind that? And this is where organizers come in and educators come into play, playing a big role in how we kind of expand our practices beyond just posting and amplifying. There has to be some not just online but offline action behind that, and so we have to be much more critical in how we take in information across social media.
Isn't there a dichotomy here, though? Because another member of the public I read said, please type out Black Lives Matter with no hashtag, so that doesn't mute vital dialogue. If you do it without a hashtag, it may, as he suggests, get the message out there without clogging everything else up. But if you don't put a hashtag with it, it doesn't. So what do you do?
So I study hashtags, and I've written lots of studies on them and dissertations. So the way that I look at hashtags as a process, as a technical process to document, index information, plain and simple, right? And so what we're seeing a lot with some of the organizers and folks on the ground is that they're using hashtags in very savvy ways. And unfortunately, going back to the Blackout Tuesday hashtag, like I said before, it became a distraction because, again, going back to the practice of how we use hashtags, folks were using it in conjunction with another hashtag that was trying to organize people on the ground. So I want to caution against kind of thinking about hashtags as just, some trivial thing that people do. It's actually a very systematic and savvy way of organizing people on the ground, offline and online, and to find conversations about how people are talking about this moment in discourse. So I value the process, the indexing process of hashtags. I'm an academic and it's kind of a nerdy thing, but I think it's important that we kind of reframe and reorient ourselves to how we look at the use of hashtags and information and how it spreads.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hafsah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? If you want your campaign to work, if you want to get the message out there, do you use one or do you not?
Yeah, no, I think the complexity of social media is I'm learning a lot from this conversation right now because I think as individuals, especially because we're so distant from organizers sometimes because of the virus, and because a lot of us just aren't reading up on what is actually happening, we don't know how to use these tools. And I think we do need to educate one another to be able to organize in a manner that's useful for us. And I think going back to the points made before, I think the onus shouldn't be on the Black community to educate. However, if you have the ability to, I definitely think that we should be putting ourselves out there. But I also think that the responsibility does lie with the people who created the structure and uphold the structure. You have to be able to recognize your own privilege and you have to be willing to learn about that for yourself. I think we do a lot of, what did the Black community experience? What did you go through? What is your history? But why haven't we asked what's the history of the white community? How have you upheld racism? How have you neglected to understand your privilege in certain circumstances? And I think those are questions that the Black community can't answer for you.
But does there have to be a goal to a social media campaign? I mean, I know Black Lives Matter is overarching. It covers, in your case, Charles, not only your personal life, I'm sure, but also the music industry, as you've suggested. Does there have to be a particular goal? Hafsah first, and then you, Charles, for a media campaign to work?
I think it depends. I think everybody has a very different perspective of what they want to get out of the Black Lives Matter sort of in terms of specific campaigns. However, I think the common goal is equality, and the common goal is justice in cases where there isn't justice. And sometimes also the common goal is removing completely those systematic systems that uphold racism and anti-Blackness. And so I think in having that common goal, any sort of campaign that is working towards that does include the white community doing certain things and the Black community doing certain things within their capabilities. So you're going to have...
We are talking here about social media campaigns. Sorry to interrupt. Charles, if it is about fairness, if it is about justice, which are nebulous concepts, how do you know whether it's succeeded or not? How do you know when to end a campaign? How do people know whether what they're doing is working?
Well, this is what I will say. I do believe that social media campaigns are effective, but I don't think it can't stop at social media. I think social media is an amazing tool to spread information. And I do believe for those of us who are, in positions where organizers or educators or have some type of particular influence, putting out vital information is important. But it really is what happens on the ground that I think that moves things along. I believe that the protests that have been happening in the United States are part of the reason why people are getting convicted for murders and killing innocent Black people. That is, and the social media component of it is spreading information so that people can't be ignorant, so people actually know what's going on. And I think it's something that has to work in tandem with people doing the work on the field and people doing the work offline. It can't just be online. And I think right now we're in a moment where this is not just going to be a trending topic for a week or two, but we're saying that we demand change and we're going to get it. And so everybody has a role to play. Black people, allies, everybody has a role to play online and offline. And I don't think this will be something that just ends or has, a specific goal. But if the information is being shared and we're seeing real results, then it just has to continue by any means necessary.
Which leads us back, if I may, it leads us back, Tara, to the issue that we asked ourselves before we did this program, which is, are social media campaigns as useful as they seem to be in getting a message across?
Well, let's just look at the origins of Black Lives Matter. It started as an utterance. It became a love letter. Alicia Garza posted on Facebook, and now it's a social movement. But it's also, it's also a way to disrupt white space here in Washington, D.C. Black Lives Matter Place is now a street name, right? So that question is, I've always found that question to be interesting. Is social media, making a difference? I would like to rephrase that. Are we making a difference using social media? And I would say yes, because it's part of movement building. And I think there's value in that, but we have to kind of, again, reorient and reframe how we understand this moment and how information is amplified and distributed.
Hafsah, let me ask you this one. You've suggested that campaigns have to be more about, not just about race when it comes to educating Black people, but about a great deal more.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think race is the thing that's overarching, but there's a lot of different systematic policies. There's a lot of institutional racism. There is a lot of specific cases that require more understanding other than just race. And I think one of the things that especially when it comes to the contention surrounding race, some people would just say they don't even recognize color. And how do you have a conversation with someone if they don't recognize color? So we have to expand the conversation, I think, a lot more.
So what do you make of the suggestion, as I've seen out there in quite a few different places, that it shouldn't be just Black Lives Matter, it should be all lives matter?
Well, for all lives to matter, Black lives need to matter. So if you truly believe that Black lives matter, you wouldn't have a problem with us using that statement. And you wouldn't, I think one of the things that I have issue with is when the statement is being used and how it's being used, because it's used as if when we say Black lives matter, we don't believe that all lives matter, and it disrupts the conversation, and it even stops the conversation from progressing. So I think everybody has that, within different cases, people are using it in different ways. But if you're disrupting the conversation, it's because you don't genuinely believe that Black Lives Matter.
Charles, in fact, any of you, but I'll go to Charles first of all. This is a little bit like trying to nail jelly to a wall, isn't it? It just blows apart because it's so big and it is so difficult to touch.
These are multifaceted issues, and we're using race as a framework to try to understand them. But I think at the end of it, we're really talking about how do we change systems and institutions that create policies that disenfranchise Black people internationally, right? All across the world, Black people are disenfranchised, and that's because systems are in place that keep us in this way. So educating about race is just step one, right? But then you have to look into housing discrimination, then you have to look into education inequality, then you have to look into classism and all these various components that go into systematic racism and affect us. But if you just stop at the veil of, oh, I'm not racist, I love everybody, or all lives matter, then you're missing the point that there are these real systems and structures that, really keep people disenfranchised. And I think the idea is that you have to start with the conversation. You have to start with getting uncomfortable, and that's the first nail. And eventually, as you're able to see this picture and see that, Black people aren't crazy, these things really do exist, and we really have been oppressed.
Perhaps if you put a nail all the way around the lump of jello, you might just about hold it in place. I'm going to ask you, Tara, as we are doing a whole series of programs on not just this issue when it comes to Black Lives Matter. So stay tuned wherever you happen to be to Roundtable, please. Tara, let me ask you as we come towards the end of this. You study where messages go. You study how they get out. You teach people how best to do it. Where is it going to go to next?
It's going to have to go to what white folks are going to have to do with each other. You're going to have to talk to each other. I think white folks need to step up around the globe, talk to each other, whether it's online or offline. The what next question for me is, what are white people going to do next? How are we gonna make this a multiracial movement, an anti-racist multiracial movement?
And I do understand that, but I suppose my question might have been a bit misleading. I don't just mean about the overall aims here. I'm talking about where does it go next in terms of trying to get the message out, because we started with the preposition that social media might be getting in the way. So how do you stop that?
Well, I don't agree that social media is getting in the way. I think we have to look to our organizers, like our lovely panelists here. We need to look to our educators, but especially our organizers, because they really are the ones that have been on the ground even before Black Lives Matter became a movement, even before Twitter, became a social media platform. They've been doing this work for a very long time, and I think we need to follow their lead in the local communities. And as an educator, first, I need to be an ally with organizers, bringing them into my classrooms, making sure that I'm amplifying their work using social media. So for me, the next step would be to follow what the organizers are doing and trust that they know what they're doing, because they've been doing it for quite a while now.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed to Tara, to Hafsah, and to Charles. We appreciate your involvement in this, and we thank you very much for watching this edition of Roundtable. We hope to have a company next time. From me, David Foster, and the team that made this possible. Goodbye for now. Stay safe.